You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
What's up, the Internet's producer Kyle? How's it going? Yes, this is Talking Shop, and I am hosting, which is odd, but not really. I often talk to you guys about how the awkward position that I inhabit in the comics business, there aren't a lot of us, right? We're not creators, but we work with them every day. We're not publishers, but we work with them every day. We're not retailers, but we work with them every day. We're not printers, but we work with them every day. And there aren't a lot of us, but the few of us there are kind of a tight-knit sort of fraternity because none of us have hair. We all have beards. We're all usually the last people in the bar at comic events. Is it a fraternity? I didn't go to college. I don't know. But our guest today is one of these people who maybe is the original inhabitant of this position in the industry. Our guest is Adam Freeman of Prana Direct Market Solutions, and you may know him from his new incredibly dope podcast that we're going to talk about a whole lot. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. What's up, the Internet? It's producer Kyle. That guy right there is Adam, the only person with an exclamation point in his name, Adam Freeman.
I gotta get better intro music. You have completely out. I mean, this is what a real pro has. Like, yeah, I mean, that's some quality shit. Can I say shit?
Yeah, I don't care.
Okay, good. Okay.
Dirty little secret. I write almost all of it myself.
Really?
Yep.
Damn.
I get bored at night while I'm waiting for people to email me things I need. So I play around in Pro Tools and GarageBand and with my guitar and my keyboard, and I write most of it. The trick is, if you hear hip hop, it ain't me. I don't have that kind of rhythm.
You know, I recently took up the ukulele just to give me something to do during those periods, right? That's yeah. So apparently, that's what I need. I just need to be playing a ukulele intro from now on.
Right? Yeah. It's just it's right here, man.
It's right there. It's all right there. It's just yeah. Anyway, hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going, man? It's
good.
It's good to see you. We don't see each other nearly often enough.
We do not. No.
But I kind of, we talked about it a little bit beforehand, a little bit before the show, and I kind of mentioned in my introduction. I called you the Swiss Army Comics Pro. You've done just about everything, or you work with just about everybody.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've been at this now, like, I guess all in like 30 years or so. I started as working in a comic shop, and then I bought the comic shop, and then we won an award, and then I started working in publishing and just as sales, which happens a lot. That, like, you know, that comics employee to publishing sales guy pipeline is really well tread. And then, you know, once you're curious, once you start digging, I will tell you that for the first probably, I don't know, maybe even 10 years of working in publishing, I didn't want to know anything. I felt like that was my superpowers. I didn't want to write. I didn't want to edit. I didn't want to publish. I just wanted to sell books. I wanted to know who all the players were. But, you know, comics is like that. It just draws you in. So.
Right. And when I first got into radio, a guy I worked with who told me, once it's in you, it's in you.
Yeah.
You can run as far as you want,
but it's in you.
You're still a radio guy.
Well, I have this theory that comics, especially comics as an industry, almost as an entity, right? Let's think of comics as an organism. Once you know how it works, it won't let you go. You're not allowed to leave. And so it just keeps dragging you back. And we've seen people working at many different publishers who are just, you know, they just kind of move from one place to another. And occasionally they'll go off and try and work in, I don't know, whatever it is people do outside of comics. I still don't really quite understand that. But and then they just come back, you know? So, I worked at a 3-ring binder factory for 3 months. I think that's 3-ring binder factory.
Dude, it's incredibly fascinating work.
Was the buggy whip factory not hiring anymore? It's
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and you were just where you need a horse and buggy and a whip ain't that far from me.
That I'm sure. Yes. Oh, that's right. I remember. I was just in Ohio. We were talking about it. Yeah.
Not that far from me. But no, I tried to get out of comics during the pandemic when my store closed. I went to work doing graphic design and screen printing at a 3D binder factory.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm designing binders with legally not comic book covers on them. Because it's in you, right?
Yeah, it's in you.
So how did we know? I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but give us your origin story. Give us
my origin story.
Right? How you got to be the Swiss Army Comics Pro.
I don't know. I grew up. My dad was entrepreneurial, and we came from people who were always just learning how to fix everything. I have all my uncles, my great uncles, and all the women in my family. Everybody really has this like need to understand how shit works, right? We just need to know how all the components work together. So like if your car breaks down, you're not stranded. If your dishwasher breaks, you're not waiting for somebody to fix it. No, so that was the kind of the culture I grew up in. And my dad was super entrepreneurial, grew up in, he was working in owning restaurants and kind of building restaurants, those chains. And I was just around it all the time. And I knew that I kind of just knew I wanted to be my own boss. That's all I really knew. And I was always really interested in a lot of different things. I remember going to the library back when that was a thing you would do. And I brought up this stack of books, and it was, I don't know, it was all nonfiction. It was all like in 8 different subjects. And then I asked the librarian for a book on, I think it was like solar panels. I wanted to understand how they worked. And she said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Nothing. I'm just curious. I'm just curious in a lot of different ways." So
you have ADHD is what's happening.
That's exactly. I have since learned to weaponize my ADHD. So, so that's just who I grew up as. And so when I went to go looking for work, I always took jobs working for people who had started their own businesses. Up to and including working. I had a job that took me to California from Texas. And while I was there, I went and found a comic shop, and that comic shop offered, wanted to hire me. And that just one thing led to another. And so I just keep following these people who are entrepreneurial by nature. And so got the job at the comic shop, ended up buying the comic shop, owned it for about 10 years or so with my then wife and partner. And then I left in 2010-ish to go work in publishing, because turns out there was a big crash caused by some people who doing some shady deals with loans. And I had to go find a job because nobody was buying comics. And so started working in publishing, and I just haven't stopped since. And every time I either lose a job or get laid off. I got laid off from my first job in comics. And the first thing I did was just kind of start taking in freelance work, as you know. And oftentimes it's, well, we need somebody to do this. Can you do this? I'm like, yeah, I understand that well enough. And the next thing you know, you have this whole toolkit of how to make, just like the one-man band of comics. And, some things I do specialize in. We have a CRM, a customer, I don't remember what the CRM stands for. But it's a customer data.
Oh God. I was just working on this the other day.
Yeah.
Putting together a CRM program for a local convention.
So I have a CRM. I have a CRM with
customer retention management.
Okay, that sounds right.
Something like that.
So I've got one of those, and it's got something like 10,000 interactions and over almost 5,000 stores in. So I will say that we have we do specialize in the direct market. It's in the name of my company, and we specialize in knowing what the size of it is and how things are going, and what that has become really the thing that people hire only us for. But that said, once we're in the door, I go, yeah, I could do that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I think the fact that there is someone who specializes in the direct market, and knowing that you did it probably gave me the balls to do it myself
Oh,
on a different scale. Like
sure.
I came at it from this direction, right? From broadcasting, from
Right.
the social media sort of, hey,
I
let's
found
make
myself
great videos.
there. So,
Right, right.
you
It all winds up in the same
you're
place.
there
It's
ahead
gotta
of
go in
me.
the same place. Right. It's this place. It's the Hyatt bar after C2E2. It's like,
Exactly.
we're
Right.
all
We
going
all
the
end up
same
at the same
place.
place. Yeah.
Right. It's like rental cars. If you only had to drive them one way, they'd all wind up at the Grand Canyon.
Yes.
So I have to say I admire that, but tell everybody what Prana does exactly. Like, what is,
right.
if you're out there and you're watching the show and you work at a LCS?
Sure. Okay. So we do a number of things. So much like my ADHD brain, Prana goes in a lot of different directions at once because all of those interactions are data. Every time you learn something about somebody, it makes your company stronger and it makes you more capable of doing stuff for your clients. So our primary business is as consultants. We work for people who want to create comics. They want to learn how to build a publisher. They want to learn how to um, interact with freelance artists and writers. They want to learn how to work with editors and printers, and they want to learn how to set up a distribution deal and negotiate all of that. And they want to learn how to do all of those contracts, and then they need to know some printers, so we introduce them to them, and then at that point you got to talk to some retailers, and there's nobody like us for talking to retailers. We have a retailer call team that is on the phones every week talking to retailers. We're finally building a newsletter. I don't know why it's taken me so long, but we're finally building a newsletter that is going out to retailers in the next couple of weeks because we have something cool to attach to that. I might tease that later. We'll see. So basically anything that you want to do in publishing, we can do for you. And if you're a publisher and you say are looking to replace or beef up part of your team, we can come in and help with that. We just did a job for Distillery, the big publishing company, and they wanted to communicate to their retailers that we're moving exclusively to Diamond Comics for distribution. So we got on the phone and we called them. So that's the kind of work that we do, is when you are a publisher, an established publisher, and you just need some help, right? Say you need some help at a convention. I get those calls often. Sometimes we can help. Sometimes I just go, hey, what about this guy? Sometimes you're just looking to hire someone, right? You need to hire a new salesperson. I get those calls a lot. Do you know of anybody? And I always have a running list of the people I've met in comic shops who I think are ready to make that step. So we do that. So that's number one. We also do things like the Comic Shop Checkup, which is a service that we offer for free to all comics retailers that you fill out a questionnaire, tell us about your business, tell us what services you're using for really boring stuff like payroll and your credit card, service provider, and your accountant, like all of those really boring behind the scenes things. We'll go through and look at what you need and look at what you're paying and make recommendations. And on average, we save the stores that have participated something like $9,000 a year, just with this a free service that we do for stores. And then, this is the patter I usually give to publishers. And there are a couple things that I'm working on that I'm not ready to talk about in public. So I'm pausing because I can't remember what to say next. So
no, and that's fair. It's the idea. I think a lot of comic fans don't understand the boring of comics. Like, you shared an article, and our friend Brian shared an article, and I shared an article, and a whole bunch of people are sharing an article right now about what the lines on a barcode means.
Yeah, Brian Garside, the creator of Managed Comics, which is a POS and subscription management service for comic book retailers. So if you need, you're a comic book retailer and you need to keep track of the pulls or subs or pull box or whatever you call it at your local shop, like he has created this service, and he wrote this incredible article on what the UPC on a comic book should be. But yeah,
right.
That's that boring stuff that you need to know that keeps the whole machine running.
Right. That's the stuff that gets me fired up, right? Is this idea of
good data.
If we could find a way to revolutionize or change or make easier the boring small minutia of running the business, it leaves more time for the people who are running the business to talk about who's going to win in a fight, Batman or Superman, like the things they actually want to do.
Right. Yeah. Because nobody ever opened their own comic shop because they wanted to worry about their POS system.
Right. Or they wanted to worry about how they're going to get health insurance.
Yes.
Exactly. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you don't do all those things so that you can. So yes, we are doing our best to take some of that off of the plate of the retailer, because at the end of the day, when I started this company back in, I guess it was 6 years, 2 days ago or 4 days ago. I don't remember. Anyway, it was 6 years ago. I said two things to people who asked me why I'm doing it. One was I wanted to be one of the few people who saw the whole board, right? I want to know what publishers are dealing with. I want to know what printers are dealing with. I want to know what retailers are dealing with. I want to know what creators are dealing with. I wanted to be one of those few people who could just keep it all in their head. And two, I wanted to be one of the few companies, want to have one of the few companies that's actually incentivized for the whole industry to do well. Because I did see a future 6 years ago where Diamond was no longer the monopoly, and that they had at that time. And I knew that if that were the case, we would end up where we are, which is that there is nobody really kind of with their hand on the tiller. Right. It's just, we're all just working in a dynamic situation of trying to build our own companies inside of this really complex system. So that was my goal. And, it's 6 years in, and I've had some wins and losses, but that
see the whole board mentality. Yeah. Like, I can't tell you how often that I quote you saying that and quoting Jed Bartlett, maybe.
I probably. Yeah. I think you quoted. I think that's the second West Wing reference of this episode so far. By the way.
Oh yeah, no. About a third of my dialogue in my life is a West Wing reference. But no. The idea of seeing the whole board, and I don't expect you to have actual numbers at the tip of your tongue, but what percentage of the direct market do you feel like needs to evaluate how they see the whole board right now, as we live in this kind of tenuous situation between the economy not necessarily being the monster we need it to be, publishers in limbo, a dearth of tertiary spending ideas like weird variant covers and other kinds of things, that it's all coming at you as a retailer, as a member of the direct market.
Sure. Yeah.
What percentage of the industry do you think has a good handle on it for their business? And what percentage of the industry do you think maybe could use some thinking?
I think it's been my experience as working with publishers that when you're talking about selling to retailers, the 80-20 rule applies. And for those of you who don't know, there was this economist I don't know how long ago, noticed that the 80% of his results came from 20% of his efforts. And once he noticed this, he started seeing this pattern repeat over everything that he did. Wonderful book on the subject. I'm sure you can find even better podcasts somewhere if you really want to understand it. It's but it is one of those things that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. It's basically that. I would say probably about 20% of the comics industry is guiding the industry, because we're all part of this culture and all of our efforts change the culture that we're in. But about 20% of them have a higher indexed voice in that. I will say that they are, generally speaking, the ones you hear the least from. I would say that, like, if you think that the conversation online is an indicator of most anything in the in comics other than what happened 6 months ago, is you're going to be sadly mistaken. At some point you're going to be sadly disappointed when something doesn't go your way because you're betting on what people are saying on Twitter, but because the people who are on Twitter are not the people who are making the change. The people who are making the change are too busy to be on Twitter. So
Right.
we haven't talked about it yet, but this is primarily why I started the podcast that we have, which is to fill this need, right? To hear from these voices that can take a couple hours out of their day, one day, to talk about it, but will not take an hour out of their day every day to keep up with social media. So yeah.
Well, and that was kind of where I was heading, right? Is that there are very loud, very prolific voices that are constantly screaming that the sky is falling on comics.
Yes.
And
because if it leads, right? That's how you get attention, is by talking about things being bad.
Right. And ironically, they're two of them. They're some of the most successful retailers that you know of. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, they've been around a long time. They've made a
Right.
very big name for themselves.
Correct.
But they don't necessarily represent where the other 80 or 90% of the market is.
Sure.
Not everybody's got multiple locations. Not everybody's got a city where the gross median income is $1 million. Not everybody's got, this kind of stuff. So that's what I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you about the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask my second question second. I'll ask my third question first.
Okay, great. Let's go. Don't forget the first one.
Tell people about Comics Industry Insiders.
So Comic Industry Insiders is a project that we started earlier this year. And it was honestly to feed my own interest. I have done a poor job of creating something that will get viewers. I've done a very poor job of creating a large audience. It is a niche of a niche of a niche. It's my research in this is, if you want to build a brand on YouTube and in podcasts talking about comics, you have to do two things. One, you have to talk about what's happening in the comics themselves, right? You have to talk about superheroes. And two, you have to constantly be telling people that comics are dying. Those are the two things you have to do in order to build a big audience in YouTube, right?
There's a third thing.
Oh, good. Yes.
You have to speculate on what book came out today that's going to be worth $10 million tomorrow.
That is correct. Yes, you must do that as well. While I think that those people are very smart, and many of them are doing an amazing job. I have some of my favorites in that list. It wasn't something that I felt like I had a voice for. But what I did have a voice for, and what I did have knowledge of, was this group of people that are changing our industry in one form or another, that are becoming. They are the voices that are shifting where the conversation is going, and no one is hearing them out loud. Excuse me. I shouldn't drink bubble water on one of these things, but I had one open. You know how it is.
Yep.
So I hope that this is a good mic. I just hope it didn't get that whole burp. Whatever.
You're good. You're good.
So
I don't use this one for that reason.
I just shifted mics because I was, if you listen to our podcast, you know, I've had real trouble with sound. It's hard. It's really hard. Anyway, all this to say, I had all of these people that I knew that if other people heard them would learn something new, and that we would, as an industry, we would grow. Because once again, I tried to create a company that was incentivized for the whole industry to grow. And so this was part of that. And so we've talked to distributors, we've talked to publishers, we've talked to a lot of retailers, we talked to a couple of creators, we've talked to retailers that are off the bubble. We have on tomorrow, we have Sean Haduchko of Comics Elite, who does like a lot of incentive covers and a lot of scantily clad, incentives and variants and a lot of those kinds of things. We have talked to, I think the episode before that was Avi Ehrlich of Silver Sprocket, who could not be more different and still be a comic book publisher, right? Because they make truly alternative and what we would have called in my day underground books, things, and do an incredibly beautiful job of printing them. We've talked to we talked to Christina Merkler at Lunar Distribution. Basically, like, we're trying to get a good feeling. Like, my hope is that if you listen to this podcast every week, and it's astounding to me that people do, because these episodes go for 2 hours on average. But if you did that, you would have a much better view of the whole board. Right. And that's really, at the end of the day, what my goal was to have these conversations. And I think that when I started this whole process, I thought it was just going to be like, oh, here's a market report. Let's ask this retailer what's selling this week, and what I found was it was so much more interesting and fed me so much more to learn who these people are, to learn who they are as humans and to kind of humanize them, because so much of our industry wants us to other the other. Instead of just seeing us all as one big organism. So yeah.
Well, and you name dropped Christina. I had a semi-contentious relationship with the idea of Lunar and DCBS when I was a retailer.
Mm-hmm.
But then
But you had no problem with Steve Jeppy being a retailer.
No, I had a contentious relationship with Steve Jeppy
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
I had a contentious relationship with a number of people.
Listen, if you're a comic book retailer, you've chosen to be outside of the system. So the fact that you want to argue with people should not be surprising.
Right. No. It was the thing that helped Jeppy and I get through the problems we had. Mutual love of baseball.
Right.
We would go see an O's game, and we're not comic book people who may or may not be litigating against each other's best interests, or may not owe each other a bunch of money / product. We were just two guys who wanted to have a hot dog and a beer and watch a baseball game.
Right.
Christina, it was when I lost my store and I went to Fort Wayne, where Lunar is, and met with Jeff Stang, who I knew from Image, who was going to Lunar. And I realized,
retailer, right? He came from the Laughing Ogre stores.
Laughing Ogre, yep. It's that humanization. It's getting to know them on a personal level, going, this is just a person who's trying to provide jobs, trying to provide security, and trying to provide a better way for me and my friends to put food on our table.
The thing is that comics is such a difficult thing to thrive in. As ecosystems go, it's not really designed to make it easy for you, right? And you really do have to struggle. And so as a result of that, if you do thrive, if you create something that is, supporting you and your family and maybe a few other people who work for you, that's not only is that success, but it is almost guaranteed that you could make more money doing everything you're doing there somewhere else. Right? People in comics are here because we love comics, and it's just psychologically we can't do anything else.
Right. I'll never forget Neil Adams telling me I would have been Bill Gates if I'd have stuck in marketing.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to draw comics. I'm like, wait, you're Neil Adams. You're not.
Yeah.
So is there, you kind of named off your guest list that you've had so far on the show. You've had some really interesting conversations.
23 or 4 of them. I was determined early on. My team was like, are you sure you want to do this weekly? And I'm like, if I don't do it weekly, it'll never get done.
Right.
If I don't have that weekly countdown, I'm just never going to get done. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there someone that you haven't booked yet?
Oh,
that is your goal. Like, I'm sending this person an email every week.
I'm trying to think, because we have interviews probably scheduled for the next 3 months of content, right? But I'm always surprised at the people who say yes. There's some people that when they say yes, I'm like, oh, I thought it was gonna be harder. Okay, great, awesome. Or like going to San Diego and hearing so many people, all industry people But like that was like, you go to a bar that's just full of industry folk, and like half of them had heard the I was suddenly a celebrity in a weird way. Like it was very strange. But yeah, I mean, there are people that I'll probably never get. There's one man I'll talk to you about. I will probably never get him, so I'm just going to keep using him as an example. So I'm putting it out of there in the universe. It's a man named Chuck Parker. So Chuck Parker is, if you don't know comics, you've never heard of Chuck Parker. If you do know comics, you might have never heard of Chuck Parker. If you worked at a comic shop, you might never have heard of Chuck Parker, but you absolutely have worked with him. So this man was a banker, and Steve Jeppy, who was a postman who started his own company. I think it's just selling at like conventions and such. I'm going to get this part of the story wrong because it's been a little while. But he starts his own company and he wants to go into distribution. He recognizes that the best way to grow is to buy other companies. And so Steve has always grown through buying. And so he goes to his bank. And as you do with this kind of thing, you always have to have a relationship with a big bank. And so he goes to his bank and he says, I want to do this. And he gets to know his banker, a guy named Chuck Parker. Long story short, convinces Chuck to come work with him. Chuck was instrumental in Diamond becoming large enough to contend for the number one spot during that 90s, the late 90s, like shakeup that killed off all of the others that Marvel set in motion with Heroes World. If I was better at doing this kind of thing, I would do an explainer video about how the distribution wars would came down. Someday I will be. I'm not there yet. But anyway, so Chuck is the reason that that Steve is even capable of being in that room, right? Because without Chuck, Steve is, I mean, he's still a distributor probably, right? He's still a postman on the side. Who knows? But Chuck is the guy who makes him basically king. And Chuck has been behind the scenes of Diamond this whole time. He's never left. And he is the one person, if you've worked at Diamond, you report to Chuck. There are years you might not have even seen Steve, but you were working with Chuck. That guy I would love. He never steps out of the shadows. And if I ever get him, I might just be done. That might be when I just stop and go, all right, I got them all.
If you get that one, that will be the day when all of us who do this go, oh crap, we got to step up our game. All right.
Well, you're in no risk of that now. If you've seen my production value,
it'd be one of those things like, hey, I had Frank Miller. I had, so-and-so. I didn't get Chuck Parker.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Chuck Parker is my white whale. He definitely is. I have a couple others, people that I feel like I have a better shot at, and that you could probably name them off, and I would probably agree with you. And, if you named a few of them, some of them might be on our upcoming list. But, but yeah, Chuck is really the one. I just don't think I'll ever get him, so I can say it out loud.
Right. A few of mine will never do this kind of interview because they're just so curmudgeonly they won't do it. Like Alan Moore and some of them. But,
oh, yeah.
But yeah, I like the idea of somebody who's gettable like Chuck Parker that isn't gettable.
I mean, you have a better shot of like hanging out in Alan's neighborhood and like catch him at the pub and saying, "Hey, can I get like a selfie? Can I ask you a question on a selfie?" And then calling that an episode. You would you'd win the internet for the day.
It's true. Yeah. So the topics on Comic Industry Insider are pretty varied based on your guests, which I think it's great to have people talk about the things that they're specialized in.
Yeah.
Right. Avi is a great example because I was just listening to that this morning. I love Avi. Mainly because he sends me ska recommendations at like 3 a.m. in the morning.
This does not surprise me at all.
No. Well, and this is how I got involved with Silver Sprocket, and you'll laugh at this. We're sitting at the hospitality suite at Comics Pro last year. Not this year, but year before. First year in Pittsburgh. And his direct market sales guy, Josh, comes over and goes, "Hey, they tell me I need to fight you." I go, "Why are we fighting?" And he goes, "I don't know." And I noticed the patch on his coat, and I go, "Do you know?" And it was a band, and he goes, "Yeah." I go, "Well, then why don't we just talk about ska and pretend we're fighting?"
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
He's like, "Oh, I was in this band." I'm like, "Bro, your band opened for a band that I was in 15 years ago." And he goes, "No way." I go, "Yeah, when you weren't in it yet." It was this. Uh,
Yeah.
it's this idea of we all have something in common, even if they're not comics.
You
And
know,
so,
one of my favorite parts about that episode, we kind of did get to, and I don't want to interrupt you if you have a
no, you're good.
question, but one of my favorite parts of that episode that we dug into a little bit, and I don't even feel like even enough, is the how much comics owes to the hardcore punk rock scene of the like early 90s, late 80s,
Right.
early 90s, right? And how many people came out of that system that was like pre-internet, and yet you guys were like a nervous system that spanned the globe. It was incredible when you look back on what you were capable of doing.
Yeah, when I was
It's
working for
awesome.
Bad Religion, we couldn't get them on MTV.
Yeah.
You couldn't get them on, the Now That's What I Call Music. So you had to send weird Xeroxed flyers to like
Yes.
just the right record stores and just the right venues. And it was still this real underground kind of movement that I really do see in the indie self-publisher,
Absolutely.
small publisher game still to this day in comics.
And you see guys like Matt Rosenberg, who has said he will be on the podcast. I think we have him scheduled. I don't remember, but he is one of those that came out of the hardcore punk scene and used that aesthetic, that drive, that work, the value for that kind of work
Mhm.
to build his own career in comics. It just came out of that. You look at the zine culture that was there. You look at the ability to use hacking. Like you guys were hacking long distance calls. Like it was, you would have a zine that was made. There'd be 500 copies of it made anywhere based on off of a Xerox machine and a Kinko's. Look it up, kids. And that zine would go all over the world. It's
Well,
incredible.
when you look at San Diego Comic-Con, we just talked about it, which comes out of
Right.
the tradition of like Detroit Triple Fanfare and New York
Mm-hmm.
Fanfare and some of these shows. One of my dear friends is Arvell Jones, and
Oh.
Arvell talks about how Detroit Triple Fanfare came out of him and Keith Pollard and Rich Buckler and Al Milgram and a bunch of these guys putting together a fanzine.
Yep.
And how the guy who wound up being the promoter of Detroit Purple Fanfare was the guy who owned the mimeograph machine or had access to the mimeograph machine so they could reproduce their fanzine. Like,
yeah. Those mimeograph
So-
machines were wild too, man. Those suckers. Anyway, sorry.
but no, that's kind of where I was going, is talking about a guy like Avi or a guy like you had Brian on, or Django and
Django. Yeah.
Django. You haven't had Brian on yet, but I'm sure it'll happen.
No, I've had Brian Garside. Yeah, he's been on. Yeah.
I missed the one. Okay. I
Yeah,
missed
you
one.
should.
I'm sorry.
It's a good episode. He and
Yeah,
I got
no,
into it a little bit. It was good.
Absolutely. But having the guys who are data guys talk about data, have the guys who are
Yeah.
marketing guys talk about marketing, have the guys who are the punks talk about being punks,
Sure.
talk about jumping on tables at Comics Pro and wearing pink jumpsuits and whatever. Like,
Yeah.
what is it like? How do you feel about talking to people about the thing not only are they most passionate about, but the thing they're the best at?
Oh, I would do the show for free. I'd do it for free. Actually, I don't think we've made a dime off of it yet. Ads might be coming. So if you're looking to advertise to like a legitimately 200 comic book nerds, reach out to me. It's my favorite part, honestly. That thing that lights people up. That's the thing. That's the juice, right? The only reason that we're all in this industry is that we're passionate about culture and we're passionate about art, and giving people like the opportunity to talk about what they're passionate about and see that light in their eyes. That's the shit right there, man. No wonder every white man of my age wants a podcast. This is awesome. It's incredible. Yeah.
No. So, okay. We're going to go back to seeing the whole board because you have a podcast that's about seeing the whole board now.
Sure.
And I want people to listen to Comic Industry Insiders wherever they listen to fine podcasts or on YouTube or, all of these places. Because again, the more you know about how the wheels of the car turn, the easier it is to understand why the car does the thing you don't like.
Yeah.
Exactly. if you don't like the fact that a retailer might tell you to mind your business when you're doing something, and he's choosing the way he markets something or choosing the way
Or he
they
won't sell
present
you that
something,
book that he just sold to the guy who just came in that he knows, right? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you understand why the wheels turn that way, it helps you to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And that's a super
Right.
important thing in terms of having a healthy industry.
Absolutely.
So, what, seeing the whole board, what do you think the next thing is?
The
The
next thing.
the next fad, the next thing that the comic industry is going to go, oh man, why haven't we did this before? Is it distilleries, new digital kind of ideas? Is it something that maybe we're going to get from somebody,
Yeah. That's a really great question. I haven't actually thought about that as something. I will say that when uh, David Steinberger and Chip Moser, when they announced Distillery and what their plan was for it, there's a tweet that's on record because I had to go back and look for it to send to Chip when they just did the announcement of what they did at San Diego. I think my tweet was something like, someone will crack digital collectibles someday. And if you're going to make a short list of the people who would do it, Chip and David would both be on that list, right? Somebody somewhere at some point, digital comics or digital collectibles, comics as digital collectibles are going to happen. I do believe that. I've been involved in a couple of different businesses that have tried. It's an incredibly difficult problem to solve, but I do feel like it's necessary. It is one of those things that other industries that don't understand collectibles like we do seem to be really good at, right? And you looked at the rise and fall of NFTs. A lot of it was people just taking a page out of what had been refined in comics, right? They'd taken this thing that worked in comics and then just came over here and sold it, no matter what you think about NFTs. So I will say that we understand that world better than most. And I think someday that will happen. But what do I think the next fad will be, or the next trend, right? I guess
I will say this: you can't say the next trend is empty slabs.
You know how hard that was?
I can't imagine, but no, honest talk here. Like we can bust chops as much as we want, but honest talk. Do you have a thought?
That was, by the way, as a reference to some of the work I did with Bad Idea. We did some shenanigans-y stuff, including
that I love every second,
including the world's first invisible comic that was slabbed by CGC. So
yep. I loved every second of that. Just no.
Me too. It was fun, but it was hard. It was really fun. So what do I think the next trend will be? It's a great question. I do not know. I think that we're going to someday figure out digital comics for Western books. Digital comics have become, they're big all over the world. They just have never quite been here until you became the swiping technology that we see for things like webtoons, right? We see that somehow that doesn't work for the way we like to read comics. I don't entirely understand that cultural dynamic. Someone will crack that. I think we're going to always find ways to make these things more collectible because there's something about ownership of the book that is special for us. And anytime you can, the ownership becomes a thing, then you can, I don't think variant covers are nearly the problem that many others really like to decry because they are just, it's not a fad. It's a trend. It's been happening for 15 years slowly. And it's with us to stay. So I don't entirely know what the next thing is going to be. I know that it will probably come from someone like me, probably not me, but who knows? But it'll probably come from somebody who says, okay, here's how the problem, this is the problem we're trying to solve. Here's all the problems that we have to solve to get to the solution of this problem. And here's something that nobody ever thought of. And they're going to try it and it's going to work. And they're gonna, it's gonna be the next thing that way. I don't know. That's a really lousy answer to that question. I apologize. I should have been ready.
No, that was my one question. We talked the other night about how I usually have 3 or 4 questions I prepare for people.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was one I had for you. Is it
Oh,
was, what do you think the next thing is? And I think you're probably right to not know what the next thing is, because if we did, we wouldn't be doing this.
yeah. Well, and also, like, most people, when they sold the comics in the 90s, they didn't know they were going to be like, they were going to create this incredible thing that was going to sell cases and cases of books. It just started, and then those people who worked at those companies were like, well, if that worked, let's try this. And if that worked, let's try this. None of them were saying, let's blow up this whole market. No, they were just doing their jobs,
Right.
right? And so it will come from someone doing their job. I can tell you that, right? It's going to be something like that where somebody says, if we tried this, we might be able to sell 15 more comics. And it'll, and then instead it'll sell 15,000 more comics, and then somebody else will replicate it and refine it. And then, and then somebody like me will go in and pretend that I invented it. So yeah, that's
What, in your opinion, from your unique point of view in this
sure.
business, is the single biggest thing that is a challenge, a risk, a hurdle that the direct market has to face right now?
It's funny. I started asking this question, or something close to this question, in our podcast about, I don't know, 10 episodes ago. And then I just started repeating it. What is the single biggest risk to, it either depends on the guest. Well, they say that the single biggest risk to direct market, the single biggest risk to comics. And if you're doing this right, by the way, the next question is, and what gives you hope? Because you get a doom and gloom answer, and then you have to, here's the sunshine and light for us to leave. Not that I want to tell you how to do your job. I apologize. Okay. Anyway, biggest risk. I think I've heard a lot of really great answers to this, but I think the single biggest risk facing comics in general, comic shops specifically, publishers specifically, and distribution specifically, is I think Diamond deciding to stop distribute comics. We're in a very unique position right now where Penguin Random House has come in and taken up the single biggest market share and another couple smaller ones, and they just bought one that'll eventually probably be under their umbrella. Lunar took up number 2. Well, first Lunar took number 2, and then number 1 went over to PRH, but it doesn't matter. Lunar took up number 2 and number 3 exclusively. Well, not exclusively for number 3. It doesn't matter. You guys don't care. I care. Anyway, and a handful more that are non-exclusive. So where do we have it Diamond? Diamond is allowed to sell everybody but DC, but they have to sell under different terms. They no longer have DC at all. As a result, their volume has gone way down. And you're going to start seeing things like Marianne Marlowe, I think, was there she's been there for 25 years, head up their Diamond Summits, the big retailer gatherings. She went to go to another industry, and there hasn't been a conversation about replacing her. In fact, there are seemingly no summits on the books except for maybe San Diego. My fear is that that's the first domino, that they're going to start deconstructing the infrastructure that they had in place, all these services that we as an industry have come to rely on, and at some point decide that there are other businesses, and they have many, that their other businesses are too profitable, and why should we be distributing comics? Why is that a bad thing? Well, Lunar's not taking on a bunch of smaller publishers. PRH is definitely not taking on smaller publishers. That means if you're coming to market, if you've always wanted to be a publisher and you have money to spend, you have nowhere to spend it. There's no path to market for you. You're going to choose some other place. So we as an industry forget that a lot of this industry is funded by people who bring us investment, either as venture capitalists or as a dentist or a real estate agent or somebody else who always wanted to make their own comics. And so they come in and spend their own money. That money goes to the retailers, it goes to the distributors, it goes to all of us consultants, right? That money is crucial for keeping the whole thing going. That could all go away if Diamond stops. The big boys will still be taken care of, but there will be no path to market for people who want to get started. That means people like Jeff Smith's Bone never would have taken place. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles never would have taken place. Love and Rockets, or, I go down the line of indie books, but like all of the big ones that came out of nowhere never would have taken place. Robert Kirkman never would have gotten started self-publishing his own books. So
Right.
this is the thing that keeps me up at night.
You told me to ask you, what gives you hope?
Well, see, I should have been ready for that. What gives me hope? People I talk to every day, people like you, Kyle, right? This is in our blood, because the other half of that, what I just gave you, the other half of that conversation is, well, what happens next? And the truth of the matter is that people like you and me and Jen, right, and Nikki and everybody else who's associated with this, and we're all gonna figure things out. The guys at Source Point, I'm sure, have like 6 different scenarios of how they're going to distribute, because that's kind of who the people they are. Like, we're gonna figure something out. We're gonna build infrastructure. We will punk rock this shit to the market, right? It just will take a little while. Yeah.
Well, and I have my answers to both of those questions, and I'll save them for the day I'm worthy of being on your show. But the short answers are tribalism is the biggest fear for me. And the biggest hope is that there are still people out there every day trying to innovate. There's somebody out there right now busting their ass trying to come up with the next big idea.
I can't wait to have the conversation about tribalism, because I own my own pet theories. I think that are counter to what you're going to say. So it'd be fun.
Absolutely. So everybody, Prada Direct Market Solutions, check them out on the internet.
It's hard to say. It's a mouthful. Intentionally.
Comic Industry Insiders, wherever you can get podcasts on YouTube and every place else. Adam, where can people follow you on the social medias so that they know what's going on, or when you get a crazy wild hair up and are doing something awesome?
Well, I'm Adam, ATOM ! Freeman, pretty much everywhere. Or ADAM Freeman if you're on Facebook and my mom has paid you off and to not let me be ATOM. I think that's how it went down. But otherwise, Adam Bang, ATOMBANG. The Bang stands for the exclamation point. So there you go. I'm all over the place.
All right, buddy. Thank you for being here. We will be talking, I'm very sure, because I think we have business we have to do together. So we will be
ideas
talking
for you.
Yeah,
I have a new one I want to run past you. Oh yeah, we're not doing that on the air. It's gonna be good.
You could do that. You could do that later. I know you got someplace you got to get to. I got another show I got to run.
Yep.
So we will be talking very soon, guys. Head over and listen to the podcast. Check that stuff out. Adam, I will see you down the road very soon, I'm sure.
See you at the con bar, buddy.
Oh yeah. See you later, buddy.
Bye.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.